April 16, 1945. The Herdkin Forest, Germany. The world is mud and splintered pine. For 19-year-old Flockhelferin Liesel Brandt, the universe has shrunk to the metallic scent of her own terror and the relentless, concussive drumbeat of American artillery. The great German retreat has become a chaotic scramble through woods that the devil himself seems to have tilled with high explosives. The trees are stripped bare, their limbs twisted into skeletal claws reaching for a bruised, indifferent sky. Every few seconds, the forest floor jumps, a monstrous heartbeat counting down the final moments of the Third Reich. Her steel helmet feels flimsy, a child's toy against the shrieking fury of the 155mm shells. They call them long toms, the Americans. The sound they make is not a whistle, but a freight train tearing the air apart right before they land. Liesel is huddled in a shallow scrape of earth with 3 Wehrmacht soldiers, old men with gray faces and eyes that have seen too much. They are no longer soldiers. They are just waiting. The air is thick with the smell of cordite and damp earth, a perfume of death. She clutches the stock of her Karabiner 98K, a rifle she has never fired at another human being, its wooden stock slick with rain and her own cold sweat. Her job was to track Allied bombers, to feed data to the gun crews of the mighty 88s. She was a helper, an auxiliary. She was supposed to be part of the final, glorious defense of the homeland. Instead, she is prey, cornered in a dying forest. A new sound joins the symphony of destruction, a low, grinding growl that vibrates up through the soles of her boots. It is not the sound of artillery. It is the sound of armor. The old Feldwebel next to her, a man whose face is a road map of the Eastern Front, spits a curse. Panzer. Ihre, he rasps. Their Panzers. American tanks. The rumble grows, a mechanical predator sniffing them out. The shelling intensifies, a curtain of fire and steel meant to pin them down, to shatter their will before the Shermans arrive to mop them up. You feel the ground shake, the tremors becoming more violent. This isn't just a barrage anymore, it's a targeted annihilation. A shell lands impossibly close. The world becomes a white-hot flash in a deafening roar that feels like it has ripped her ears from her head. She is thrown, tossed like a rag doll, her helmet torn away. She lands hard in the mud, the impact driving the air from her lungs. For a moment there is no sound, only a high-pitched ringing. The world swims back into focus in blurry, disconnected images. The old Feldwebel is gone, replaced by a steaming crater. The other 2 soldiers are motionless, their gray uniforms stained with a dark, glistening red. She is alone. The ringing in her ears subsides, replaced by a new, horrifying sensation. A wet, searing fire consumes her right hand. She dares to look. Her mind refuses to process what her eyes are seeing. It is not a hand anymore. It is a mangled ruin of splintered bone, shredded flesh, and severed tendons, all swimming in a crimson tide. The rifle is gone, probably vaporized. A piece of shrapnel, white-hot and jagged, has passed through it, taking her hand with it. The pain is a living thing, a screaming entity that claws its way up her arm into her chest and seizes her throat. She tries to scream, but only a choked gasp escapes. The grinding of the tanks is on top of her now. A massive, olive-drab monster, an M4 Sherman, crashes through the skeleton trees, its hull scarred, its long 76mm gun swiveling. Men in drab uniforms and unfamiliar helmets walk behind it, their M1 Garans held at the ready. They move with a wary confidence, the movements of hunters who know the prey is exhausted. An American soldier, a boy no older than her with tired eyes, spots her. He raises his rifle. Their eyes meet across the 10 meters of churned earth. I see no hatred in his eyes, only a profound exhaustion. He lowers his rifle slightly and gestures with his head. She understands. It is over. Pushing herself up with her good arm, she stumbles forward, her ruined hand held uselessly before her, dripping a trail of her life into the German soil. She is a prisoner. Her war has ended. But as the American medic approaches, his canvas bag bearing a red cross, a new and more insidious fear begins to take root, a terror planted months ago by the confident, smiling men of the propaganda ministry. They had shown films, told stories. Stories of the Americans. The lazy, careless doctors, the butchers who saw every German wound not as an injury to be healed, but as an opportunity for amputation. An easy solution for a hated enemy. The medic wraps a crude bandage around the mangled flesh, and as he guides her toward a waiting jeep, all she can think of are those stories. Her mind screams a single repeating phrase. They are going to take my hand.
The journey in the back of the Willys Jeep is a jostling, agonizing blur. Every bump and lurch sends a fresh wave of white-hot agony screaming up Liesel's arm. The American medic, a corporal with a face smudged with dirt and fatigue, sits beside her, occasionally checking the tourniquet he'd applied high on her bicep. He doesn't speak to her. He doesn't need to. The language of pain is universal. They pass columns of American infantry marching deeper into her homeland, their faces grim, their boots caked in the same mud that coats her own tattered uniform. They pass the smoking husks of German half-tracks and the lifeless bodies of boys she might have known, their faces turned to the gray, weeping sky. It is a landscape of absolute defeat. Finally, they arrive. It's not a building, not a proper hospital, but a sprawling city of enormous mud-spattered canvas tents. This is the 128th Evacuation Hospital, a mobile city of healing and suffering pushed right up against the front lines. The air hangs heavy with the cloying, metallic smell of blood mixed with the sharp tang of disinfectant and the drone of a generator. Wounded men are everywhere. Men on stretchers, men limping, men with bandages wrapped around their heads, their chests, their souls. The walking wounded, both American and German, are segregated into waiting areas, a testament to the grim impartiality of shrapnel. Liesl is half carried to a triage tent, the nerve center of this operation. Inside, the controlled chaos is overwhelming. Nurses and orderlies move with a swift, practiced efficiency. The floor is covered in muddy footprints and discarded, blood-soaked dressings. A weary-looking major with dark circles under his eyes glances at her hand, his expression unreadable. He says something in clipped English to a nurse, who then ties a tag to a button on Liesl's tunic. It's a red tag. She doesn't need to understand the language to know what it means. Urgent, critical. She is guided to a smaller tent, the surgical theater. Here, the light is brighter, a harsh, naked bulb hanging from the central pole, casting long, dancing shadows. Several operating tables are in use, each a small island of intense focus in the surrounding gloom. The sounds are a muted symphony of horror. The clink of steel instruments, the low moans of men under anesthesia, the quiet, terse commands of the surgeons. A nurse with a kind but tired face begins to cut away the sleeve of her uniform with a pair of shears. As the cloth falls away, exposing the full extent of the damage, the nurse lets out a soft, involuntary hiss. Liesl follows her gaze. The medic's field dressing had been a mercy. Now, under the stark light, she sees the truth. It is a butcher's ruin. White shards of bone poke through torn muscle. Her fingers are splayed at impossible angles, blue and cold. It is a dead thing attached to her arm. And the propaganda, those carefully planted seeds of terror, bursts into full poisonous bloom. This is exactly what they said. An injury so severe, so hopeless, that no one would bother to fix it. Why would they? She is the enemy. It is easier to cut, faster, more efficient. Get her processed and moved to a POW camp, another nameless, crippled German. A man approaches the table. He is tall, broad shoulders, his face hidden by a surgical mask, only his eyes visible. They are a piercing blue, and they are tired, an almost geological exhaustion etched into the lines around them. He wears the captain's bars on his collar. Captain Daniel Foster, chief surgeon. He glances at the red tag, then at her hand. He gently probes the wreckage with a gloved finger, his touch surprisingly delicate. He murmurs something to the nurse. Liesl's whine snaps. The fear becomes a wild, cornered animal. They are taking it. She knows it. The surgeon, this American monster, is deciding where to make the cut. All the stories, all the warnings, they coalesce into a single, panicked certainty. They will make her a cripple, a useless burden for the rest of her life. She begins to thrash, fighting against the orderly holding her down. The words pour out of her in a torrent of desperate, hysterical German. Nein, bitte, nein, schneiden Sie es nicht ab. No, please, no, don't cut it off. Captain Foster looks at her, his blue eyes widening slightly in surprise. The nurse tries to soothe her, but the panic has taken complete control. Töte mich einfach, aber schneiden Sie es nicht ab. Kill me, just kill me, but don't cut it off. She is screaming now, tears streaming down her face, her voice raw with a terror that transcends language. She would rather die whole than live broken at their hands. The nurse prepares a syringe of sodium pentothal. As she feels the brick of the needle in her good arm, her last conscious sight is of Captain Foster staring down at her mangled hand, his face a mask of intense concentration. As the darkness rushes in, her final thought is a prayer of despair. She will wake up, and a piece of her will be gone forever.
The anesthesia floods Liesl's system, pulling her down into a black, silent ocean. Her screams fade, leaving behind a sudden, jarring quiet in the surgical tent. The only sounds now are the hum of the generator and the distant, rhythmic cough of artillery. The nurse, a seasoned veteran named Lieutenant Miller, looks at Captain Daniel Foster. Her expression is a mixture of pity for the girl and weary pragmatism. "She's out, Captain," she says, her voice low. "Amputation set is ready. We can have her prepped and out in 20 minutes. There are 6 more GIs with belly wounds waiting." 20 minutes. That is the calculus of war. Save the life, sacrifice the limb, move on to the next. It is a brutal but necessary arithmetic that has kept this tent from being overwhelmed by the sheer volume of human wreckage delivered to its doorstep day after day. In a place like this, time is the most precious commodity, measured not in minutes, but in lives saved or lost. An amputation is a straightforward, life-saving procedure. It is the easy way, the logical way. But Captain Foster does not move. He doesn't look at the waiting GIs on the triage list. He doesn't acknowledge the nurse's perfectly sensible suggestion. He remains motionless, his gaze fixed on the mangled remains of the young German woman's hand. Beneath the blood and the grime, he sees it. The hand of a girl, not a soldier. Slender fingers, the ghost of a musician's or a typist's dexterity. He sees a life beyond this muddy, blood-soaked tent. A life where a woman would need 2 hands to cook a meal, to write a letter, to hold a child. In civilian life, back in Philadelphia, Daniel Foster had been one of the country's most promising reconstructive surgeons, specializing in complex hand injuries. He had spent years of his life learning how to put things back together. But for the last 2 years, from the beaches of Normandy to the forests of Germany, his entire existence has been about taking things apart, sawing through bone, cutting away gangrenous flesh, debriding wounds so catastrophic they defied belief. He has become a master of deconstruction, a highly skilled butcher in service of a greater cause, and a part of his soul was eroding with every limb he removed. He was so tired of breaking things. He looks up from the hand, his blue eyes meeting Lieutenant Miller's over his mask. "No," he says, his voice quiet but firm, cutting through the ambient noise of the tent. "Not this time." Miller blinks. "Captain, look at it. The carpals are shattered. The extensor tendons are shredded. There's almost certainly major nerve damage. It's a mess. We don't have the time for—" "We'll make the time," he interrupts, a hard edge to his voice. He turns to an orderly. "Get me the microsurgery kit, the one from the orthopedic chest, all of it. And get another lamp over here. I want all the light you can give me." The orderly and the nurse exchange a look of disbelief. A 4 or 5 hour reconstructive surgery on a prisoner of war? On a hand that was by any reasonable standard a lost cause? With a backlog of their own boys waiting? It was madness. It was a violation of the cold, hard logic of triage. But they do not question the order. They have seen Captain Foster perform miracles before. They have also seen the toll this war has taken on him. They recognize the look in his eye. It is not just a surgeon preparing for a procedure. It is a man drawing a line in the sand. For the next 4 hours, Captain Foster wages a different kind of war. A war fought not with tanks and artillery, but with hemostats, fine-toothed forceps, and sutures as thin as a human hair. The world shrinks to the 20-square-inch field of devastation under the focused beam of the surgical lamp. Sweat beads on his forehead, stinging his eyes. His back aches, his legs grow numb, but he doesn't notice. His entire being is focused on the intricate, God-like task of creation in a place dedicated to destruction. He works with a painstaking, almost devotional patience. He irrigates the wound, flushing away the mud and cloth and microscopic debris. With the delicacy of a watchmaker, he identifies the frayed, retracted ends of the severed tendons. He coaxes them together, stitching them with a precision that seems impossible in the dim, flickering light of a field tent. He finds the median and ulnar nerves, bruised and severed, and begins the near-impossible task of reattaching them, sheath by sheath, knowing that a single misplaced stitch could mean the difference between a functional hand and a useless claw. He wires the shattered fragments of bone back into a mosaic that resembles a human wrist. Each stitch, each clamp,
Each movement is a small act of defiance against the chaos raging outside the tent. He is not just fixing a hand, he is rebuilding a future. He is pushing back, just for a moment, against the overwhelming tide of waste and loss that has defined his world for so long. Finally, after hours that have stretched into an eternity, he places the last stitch in the skin. He cleans the hand one last time, sets the fingers in a position of function, and begins wrapping it in layers of sterile gauze and plaster. The result is a bulky, anonymous cast. He has done everything he can. The architecture is there, the plumbing and the wiring have been reconnected, but whether life will flow back into it, whether the nerves will regenerate and the tendons will hold, is a question only time and biology can answer. He straightens up, his back screaming in protest, and peels off his bloody gloves. He is physically and emotionally drained, a hollowed-out shell. He has won his private battle, but as he looks over at the waiting line of stretchers, he knows the larger war rages on, indifferent to his small victory.
The world returns to Liesl Brandt, not all at once, but in slow, confusing waves. The first sensation is cold, a damp, woolen cold that seems to seep into her bones. The second is sound, a low, continuous tapestry of human misery. The sound of a man quietly weeping somewhere to her right, the rhythmic, labored breathing of another, a sudden sharp cry of pain, quickly muffled, and beneath it all, the incessant dull thud of distant guns, a sound so constant it has become the new silence. She tries to open her eyes, but her eyelids are heavy, glued shut. She is floating in a disorienting gray fog, a space between the black void of anesthesia and the harsh reality of the world. Where is she? She remembers the forest, the explosion, the terror. She remembers the American tank, the surrender, and then the tent, the bright, cruel light, the surgeon's masked face, her own screams. The memory rushes back with the force of a physical blow. Don't cut it off. Her heart begins to hammer against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in the cage. The fog in her mind begins to clear, burned away by a fresh surge of adrenaline and fear. She is in a bed, a cot really. A rough blanket is pulled up to her chin. She can smell the canvas of the tent, the lingering odor of antiseptic, and the unwashed scent of wounded bodies. This is a ward, a recovery tent. The war is over for her, but the verdict on her future has been delivered while she slept. She still doesn't open her eyes. She is too afraid. She lies perfectly still, taking inventory. Her left arm feels normal. Her legs are there. But her right arm feels alien. It is heavy, unnaturally so. And there is a dull, throbbing ache that radiates from her wrist all the way to her shoulder. But there is no sharp phantom pain. No searing agony from the stump she was so certain would be there. For a full 10 minutes, she remains frozen, a prisoner of her own dread. The propaganda is a potent poison. They had been so convincing. The newsreels had shown German soldiers, brave and defiant even after capture, being cruelly mistreated by grinning, gum-chewing Americans. The radio broadcasts from Dr. Goebbels had painted a vivid picture of Allied barbarism, of doctors who took a perverse pleasure in mutilating the defenders of the Reich. They told you it was easier for them to amputate, to create a nation of cripples that could never fight again. She believed it. Why wouldn't she? It was the only truth she had ever been told. She has to know. The uncertainty is a worse torture than the truth, whatever it may be. Slowly, forcing her muscles to obey, she pries her eyelids open. The light is dim, filtered through the thick olive drab canvas of the tent roof. She is in a long row of cots, maybe 20 of them, each occupied by a wounded soldier. Some are American, some are German. In this place, under the impartial care of the medics, uniforms seem to matter less than the nature of the wound. A nurse moves between the cots, her movements efficient and quiet. Liesl takes a shallow, shuddering breath. Then, with an agonizing slowness, she forces her head to turn. She looks down the length of her own body, following the contour of the rough wool blanket to her right side. She sees her arm. It is encased in a thick plaster cast from her knuckles to her elbow. It is a bulky, formidable-looking thing, clean and white against the drabness of her surroundings.
She stares at it, her mind struggling to comprehend. It is there. Her arm is there. But is it whole? Is there a hand inside that plaster shell? Or is it just an empty, bandaged stump, a cruel deception? The fear is still a cold knot in her stomach. The throbbing ache could be anything. Phantom limb pain, she's heard the veterans call it. The memory of a limb that is no longer there. She has to try. She has to know. She closes her eyes again, concentrating all of her will, all of her being, into a single, desperate command sent from her brain down her spinal cord, along the nerves of her arm, toward a destination that may or may not exist. The command is simple. Move. Just a twitch, a flicker, anything. She focuses on her index finger, picturing it in her mind, remembering how it felt to point, to trace a line, to press a button. She sends the signal. She waits, her breath caught in her throat, her entire world hanging suspended in this single, silent moment. Nothing. She tries again, a wave of despair washing over her. It is gone. They took it. The cast is just a hollow tomb. Then deep within the plaster, she feels it. A faint, barely perceptible flutter. A ghost of a movement. It is weak, hesitant, but it is undeniably there. A flicker of life in the darkness.
The flicker. It was so faint she almost believed she had imagined it, a desperate hallucination born of hope and fear. She holds her breath, focusing every ounce of her concentration, and sends the command again. Wiggle your fingers. This time, the response is stronger. Deep inside the cast, she can feel the distinct, separate movements of her own tendons pulling, her own muscles contracting. It's a clumsy, weak, and painful motion, but it is hers. The index finger, the middle finger, all of them. They are there. They are alive. A sound escapes her lips, a choked, ragged sob that is equal parts disbelief and overwhelming relief. The dam of her terror, so carefully constructed by months of propaganda and the raw fear of the last 24 hours, finally breaks. Tears stream from her eyes, hot and silent, soaking the rough pillow beneath her head. They are not tears of pain or sorrow, but of a profound, shattering gratitude that leaves her weak and trembling. She brings her left hand over, gently touching the rough plaster of the cast, as if confirming that it is real. Inside this shell, her hand, shattered and broken, but whole, still exists. The American monster had not taken her hand. He had saved it. The lazy butcher had spent hours, grueling, painstaking hours, she now understood, in a dimly lit tent, piecing her back together. He had chosen the most difficult path, not for one of his own, but for an enemy, for her. The sheer, incomprehensible humanity of the act short-circuits her entire worldview. The carefully constructed narrative of the enemy, the faceless, barbaric armies, collapses into dust. In its place is the image of a man's tired blue eyes, focused and determined. A shadow falls over her cot. She looks up through her tear-blurred vision to see him standing there, Captain Foster. He is no longer wearing his surgical mask. His face is deeply lined with exhaustion, his shoulders slumped, but his blue eyes are clear and calm. He holds a metal chart in his hand. He looks at her, then down at the cast, a question in his eyes. Liesel knows no English, and he knows only a few words of German. The gulf of language, nationality, and war stretches between them. But in this moment, it is irrelevant. She needs to show him. She needs him to know that his monumental effort was not in vain. With her left hand, she gently supports her casted right arm. Focusing again, she wiggles her fingers. It is a small, weak movement, but in the quiet of the ward, it is a shout of triumph. A slow smile spreads across Captain Foster's weary face. It is not a broad grin, but a small, profound expression of satisfaction. It is the look of a craftsman seeing his work function, of a creator witnessing his creation come to life. He reaches down and gently touches her fingertips where they emerge from the cast, checking for color and warmth. His touch is professional, yet deeply human. He says a few words in English, his voice soft. She doesn't understand them, but she understands the tone. It is the sound of encouragement, of success. He makes a note on his chart and then looks at her again, his eyes meeting hers directly.
In that shared gaze, everything is communicated. Her silent, tearful gratitude, his quiet professional pride, the unspoken acknowledgement of a shared humanity that has for a few hours transcended the hatred and destruction of their world. He gave her back more than a hand. He gave her back her future, her ability to live a normal life after this madness was all over. He had treated the patient, not the uniform. As he turns to move to the next cot, to the next broken body that needs his skill, Liesl understands something fundamental. The war was a vast, impersonal machine of death, chewing up lives and spitting out wreckage. But within that machine were individual people making individual choices, choices to hate and choices to heal. The propaganda had told a simple story of monsters and heroes, but the truth, she now realized, was infinitely more complex and in its own way more hopeful. The man who had just walked away, the enemy surgeon, had fought his own battle in that tent. Not a battle for territory or ideology, but a quiet, stubborn battle for one small piece of a shattered world. And in saving her hand, he had saved a part of himself too. He had chosen to build, not to break, reaffirming his own purpose in a world that had tried its best to strip it away. Lying in the dim light of the ward, listening to the distant thunder of the war, Liesl Brandt closes her eyes, not in fear, but with the first glimmer of a future she thought had been stolen from her forever.